Welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee, Monday the 10th of January. Happy New Year to everyone. And before I start the agenda, I'd like to welcome Lisa Cumston, who is our new Audit Manager, covering Merthyr Tydfil, and Catherine Davis, also in part of the Regional Audit team, who was involved with one of the reports. And welcome Chris Davis, who is the new cabinet member, covering as well our area of governance and audit. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, Councillor Darren Roberts, Councillor John Thomas and Mr Robert Williams, our co-opted member.
And Mr Bob Williams may possibly join us later on, am I right?
Yes, Chair, Mr Robert Williams may be able to join later.
Okay. There's no other apologies. Go on to item 2. And that's declarations or any declaration of interest taken into account, paragraph A and B. There are none. We then go on to item 3, and that's the half-year review of the annual governance statement, which is pages 5 to 14. And Catherine, I believe you're taking us through the report.
I'll take us through the report, Chair, if that's okay. I'm sure Catherine can help me out with any difficult questions that I may be asked that I can't answer. So that's the hope anyway. So yeah, thank you very much for your comments earlier too, Chair. Yeah, just to echo your comments, just to welcome Lisa to her first Governance and Audit Committee for Merthyr Tydfil. Lisa's, very experienced audit manager, but she's been covering Merthyr and Rhondda and Taff going forward. And as a first meeting, I'm going to present most of the reports, so we're going to break Lisa in gently with presenting one report. I'm sure she'll pick up more as time goes on. Yeah, this report is a fairly brief report. It's just the purpose of the report is to provide members of the Governance and Audit Committee with an update on status of the recommendations reported at the final annual governance statement included in the statement of accounts for 2021, which wasn't too long ago in reality, and also the significant governance issues arising as a result of the review for 2021. Catherine, you've already been introduced to. Catherine's liaised with the senior officers across the authority in terms of getting the relevant information to give you an update on progress on the recommendations and the governance issues mentioned in the annual governance statement. And they are included in Appendix A in the agenda pack and Appendix B. I wasn't going to go into a huge amount of detail on that, but obviously it's there for members to read. As I say, it's not been long since we presented the final annual governance statement to the committee, but certainly I think it's good practice to come back with a sort of mid-year progress update to keep the issues on the agenda and make sure progress has been made. So I think what you'll find is that there's been progress made on a number of the aspects, or if not, there is things to be reported. For example, the updated anti-fraud and corruption and bribery policy and the strategy are on the agenda later on, for example. And there's one or two other things mentioned that are in the pipeline to come forward in the near future. And as far as the significant governance issues, there's a number of things there being reported in Appendix B in terms of progress, not least of which is obviously the financial settlement, the initial settlement from the Welsh Government, which is positive for all authorities, but it was certainly positive for Merthyr Tydfil as well, which is obviously relatively good news, although there will obviously still be budget pressures for every authority to deal with. So I wasn't going to go through each item, but happy to try and deal with any questions. And I'm sure Catherine will be able to help out, and maybe Steve as well if there's anything that we need to add to.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councillor David Chaplin.
Right, thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. I don't know if you can answer. On page 7, item 1, it mentions the for councillors the PDR personal development review, and it said the majority of councillors have completed their personal development reviews, but not all of them. How many have not completed them? Do we know that?
I certainly don't know the answer to that question. I don't know whether Myra's been involved from a Democratic Services or whether Catherine would be aware, or if not, I'm sure we can come back and give a written response to the committee members afterwards. So Myra or Kath, I don't know if you can add anything.
Yeah, I didn't take that amount of detail in. So what Anne Taylor had stated was basically that it's up to the councillors whether they complete the PDR forms. They can't enforce it. You know, as best practice, it's best for them to do it, but they can't enforce that sort of completion. But I can ask Anne to see if she can.
I understand it's not enforceable. I was just interested to know how many had completed it. About 6 months ago, a question came up around the mandatory training we receive is Bob's Business that we complete online, and I did ask at that time how many of the councillors had completed that. Nobody ever got back to me. So we do have mandatory training. I'd be interested also to know if that is being done by all councillors at some time with an update, please.
Okay. So, Chair, we're happy to liaise with Democratic Services and Anne Taylor in particular to try and pick up answers to those questions and then circulate that to members, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'll be fine, Mark. Yes,
Okay.
thank you for that. Councillor Chaplin, you got some more?
Yeah, next question is on item 8, top of the page, and it says that the Cabinet Forward Work Programme has not been developed for 2020 to 21 due to the pandemic, but the 2021-2022 will be available on the council's website. So it's obviously not on the council's website yet. I was fortunate I did receive a copy of the latest Cabinet Work Programme because Councillor Salmon sent it to me, but I'm concerned that it's not being sent to all councillors and the ones on scrutiny and audit. And I'm querying the fact, my question is how can you say this is implemented when there's obviously things like it's not on the cabinets, it's not on the website yet, so it's not completed. It's more like aspiration than implementation. I question whether this has been implemented, if there's action still outstanding.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Chaplin, which point was that on in the report?
It says item 8 at the bottom, the Cabinet Work Programme. It says that it will be available on the council's website, but it's not available yet. And then it's down as that the Forward Work Programme has been implemented. Me, a lot of members, unless I have not got to see this yet.
Oh, I can see. Sorry, I couldn't see that on
Which page is that, Councillor Chaplin?
It's still page 8, yeah.
Page
8.
Okay, yeah.
Cabinet Forward Work Programme has been developed. Obviously, my other concern, which I've been mentioning for a while, is it says it wasn't developed in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic, but Audit Wales have been asking for this for 3 years. It was no surprise, you know, it's taken 4 years to develop this, and all councillors still have not seen a copy of it.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know the answer to the points you're making, if I'm honest. Kath, was there any further information that you had?
Yeah, so basically we had reported back in October that this had been implemented because it was made available on the intranet, so not external but on internal internet. You haven't seen that, have you?
Not been made available and not been distributed to all members.
Oh,
okay.
So it's on the intranet, but it hasn't been circulated.
I've not seen it on the intranet. I've not been told it's on the intranet and not been told where to look. Okay. You know, there's a communications lag here. Okay. All members should receive a copy and know where it is. Not rely on being sent it by somebody.
Yeah, what I can suggest then, Chair, is again we can liaise with Anne, assuming it's Anne Taylor would be the person to flag this up, and we can ask Anne to send an email out to all members, just flagging up that the Forward Work Programme is on the intranet, etc.
Yeah, it might be an idea that it's circulated to all members of the council, apart from ourselves. Yeah. Okay.
Point. Okay.
And my final question is on page 9. Item 8, and it said it is anticipated the final draft model constitution will be available by the end of December 2021 and adapted and suited from Earth to Tydal by the end of January 2022. Obviously, it's mid-January. How far away are we from this draft constitution? Again, because obviously members should see sight of this. Is this going to go to a scrutiny?
Again, I can't answer that one. I do happen to know that the model constitution was published before Christmas for all local authorities. So the work that was being done across Wales, I know that was released then, if I put it that way. In terms of the current position in Merthyr, I think Simon Jones is involved, for example, from legal in that work alongside other officers. I don't know any more detail, but I'm sure it'll come to members, which committees it'll go to and when. I'm not sure, but we can liaise with Simon and ask him some of those questions and get a response to committee members on the points that Councillor Chaplin has raised.
Yeah, it's the target date is end of January, yeah.
Yeah, there was a task and finish group set up to look at this, wasn't there, a few months ago?
Yeah.
So, yes, I'll be fine, Mark, if you could find that out.
Thank you, Chair. That's my final question. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Tubby?
I was just looking on page 12 about the impact of the flooding. Is this a 3-year capital works programme? How vulnerable are we at the moment to a repeat of of the flooding of Storm Dennis? Because there's not even money guaranteed to complete the work, really.
Yeah, if I could answer, I would say, from the point of view of the money. I think I've got an echo.
Yes. Can most people turn their cameras off?
Microphones.
Yes, as far as the money is concerned, Chair, then we've had a letter from the Welsh Government which have basically stated that the monies will be available for this current financial year, and that's, should I look up where we were? Let's have a look. And that is £4.7 million. But as far as concerning and then going forward for 22-23, we're not quite sure about that. But we've been told by the Welsh Government that we should carry on with the actual schemes that we had planned, because obviously they are vital schemes, and the monies will follow. So at the moment we are carrying on with those urgent schemes as and when. And we're funding it out of our own monies at the present time, or cash flow. But obviously, we are expecting this monies to come in at a certain time.
Can I add to that?
Thanks. Yeah.
To Councillor Tubby, because it does say on page 12 on your right-hand side at the very bottom that the council has received notification of the 4.7 million support for 21-22, but is still waiting payment from the Welsh Government, and no confirmation has been received for 22-23. Steve, isn't it leaving it a bit late to actually advise us when we're going to receive this £4.7 million? I understand what you've said, but carrying on with the work. But surely we have to have that money sent to us in the very near future.
Yes. The thing is, though, is that obviously because some of the projects are very urgent, is that they have to be commenced. And it's understanding then that that is the assurance we've had. So it is that expectation that at some stage we will then receive that monies, but at the moment it is a case of carrying out the work because it's urgent.
Yes.
Obviously, as part of the Welsh Local Government Association as well, there is a lobbying and of the Welsh Government, but what we've currently been told is that the Welsh Government are reliant on Westminster, and the money is just coming from Westminster. But at the moment, we haven't heard anything further since we had that letter last summer.
So there's a delay in relation to this £4.7 million because of the delays higher up the chain at the UK government level. Is that what you're saying?
It is allegedly, yes.
Which is a bit worrying when we've had actual notification. I've no doubt the Welsh government have had assurances, but yet, you know, at this stage now, we're into the second week in January, and there's no indication when, by the sound of it, even when the Welsh government is going to receive the money, which I would say is a little bit concerning.
It is concerning, but as I said, we've had that assurance that that £4.7 million will be received at some stage. So again, it's a case of carrying on that lobbying and the discussion, and to make sure that that monies will be received. But at this stage, my understanding is that we haven't incurred all that expenditure yet in this current financial year, and there's a potential that some of it will go into next year anyway.
Right.
But
so whenever you receive it, if we started it, we can roll over that 4.7 million after the 1st of April.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Right.
Okay. Well, we happen to be on that particular page, and we're talking, referring to the Welsh Government. Higher up that page, under the further COVID-19 implications, it refers to the financial implications of COVID. And on the right-hand side there, it says the Welsh Government provides support through the Hardship Fund and has continued throughout 21-22. But it's due to cease on the 31st of March 22. Have you had actual confirmation that that's definitely going to cease? Because it doesn't look as if the implications of COVID is going to disappear by the end of that month.
Yes, at this point, it is supposed to be ending on the 31st of March. But obviously, as we go through into next financial year, we don't know at this stage what just will be the impact of Omicron going forward. So there is a potential, I suppose, for further monies. But as it currently stands, we just have been told that the Hardship Fund will be ceasing on the 31st of March. But obviously, we'll just have to wait and see.
And has the Welsh Local Government Association made representations on that particular point about its ceasing?
It has, yes, but obviously because of the settlement that we had for next financial year, and we ourselves at a plus 9%, what the Welsh Government is stating is that there are monies in the settlement. But we don't know yet what the financial issues are going to be going forward. And so if it is the case that there are some further financial issues, then there will be a further lobbying to get some more monies then next year.
Okay, thank you. Whilst I'm asking some questions, I've got one on page 7. I think this is probably for Catherine Davis. And that's under the heading Ensuring Openness and Comprehensive Stakeholder Engagement. The bottom paragraph there, it says in 2021, a total of 402 corporate complaints were received by council. 126 not upheld, 118 were upheld, 61 resolved by frontline service, 46 no response of outcome from the manager or the department. Do you know why there was no response and what were the reasons why there was no responses?
Yeah, this was queried about when it was audited as well. So what Gaynor Corporate Complaints Officer stated were that sometimes it could be like a number of things where a waste bin hadn't been collected or something like that, and they've made a formal complaint, and it just meant that they had needed to respond on that type of complaint. So I don't know the detail of the full 46, but that was the example that I was given by Gaynor. So if you need more information on that, I can check and get to you. So,
but I would have thought that any complaint that's made by anyone, whether it be via a councillor or directly from the members of the public, if they've made a complaint, however minor it might be regarded, whoever's the officer in that department should come back to them and explain what the situation, has occurred.
I think in addition to that as well is staff capacity within the service area. So I think it's only Gaynor, maybe one other part-time member of staff in the complaints part in Merthyr. So she was saying like they haven't got the capacity to then chase up manager or department responses and stuff then. So
right, okay, Mark.
Yeah, just to add to what Catherine said, really, Catherine's right. We did query this because exactly for the reasons that you said, Chair. Really, the complaints report, annual report, and part of the new duties of the Governance and Audit Committee is to look at complaints and the capacity and the capability of the authority to respond to corporate complaints. That's due to come to the February Governance and Audit Committee. So, we can obviously let Gaynor know and Simon, because I think the reporting now is up through to Simon Jones, flag up the questions being asked, but I think it would be a legitimate question for members to ask, at that point as well when the report comes forward. So, that without sort of prejudging that could be a recommendation going forward from the committee in terms of identifying certain things that could be improved possibly. But, Gaynor may have a lot more information to explain the circumstances that perhaps myself and Catherine don't know the full details.
Okay, that's fine. Any other questions from members? If not, any comments from members? If there are no comments, I just want to reiterate really when I questioned the notification of this £4.7 million support for 21-22, I do think that it's important that we follow that up and ensure that we've really sorted that out and the money has arrived in the coffers of Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council. I know that that is being looked at by the department, but I think it needs to be dealt with. Yes, Councillor Chris Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. So obviously, my apologies for dipping out. My laptop decided to do a Windows update just as I joined, and obviously this being my first meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee as the portfolio member. So I'm not sure the etiquette in your committee is the chair, but whether you'd welcome contributions from me, I'm more than happy. Cabinet has had conversations about the £4.7 million money for flooding, and I'll take it up with the leader and the chief executive, and we will make sure a letter, I know one has gone previously, that we will write and we'll pursue that with the appropriate ministers and officials at the Welsh Government at the earliest opportunity and keep you and committee updated. Thank you for supporting and raising the matter with us.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davis, and I did welcome you to the meeting when it started, but I think you were having some difficulties. Yes, and we welcome contributions from the cabinet member, and perhaps if there's a further letter being sent, you can express in that letter that the Governance and Audit Committee have concerns that this money is not forthcoming.
Yeah, Councillor Jones, thank you so much for that. We'll make sure that that is included in the body, and the same with respect of hardship funds as well. Obviously, the leader through the Always Leaders meeting with ministers is making regular representations about the impact of hardship fund. And I know I don't need to say to you, along with committee, we know about the concerning, because you've raised it at full council and other committees of the council in respect of the impact of homelessness alone to the council's budget moving forward. So we will be making very firm, strong and representations to through the WLGA and to ministers directly. So thank you for bringing that up as a really pertinent, important issue that will impact on our 9% settlement.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that. If there are no other comments, nobody else has indicated, I'll take you back to page 5, and the recommendations there under 2.1 is that members of the committee review the information contained within the report on the progress made against the 2021 annual governance statement recommendations and significant governance issues. So we'll now go to the vote, and I'll deal with it in the same way as full council. Any members wishing to abstain? Any members wishing to vote against that recommendations? Members wishing to vote for recommendations under 2.2.1, please vote now.
Votes carried, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. If you can lower your hands now, please. Thank you. We then go on to item 4. That's the progress against the internal audit plan from the 1st of April 21 to the 22nd of December 2021, and it's pages 15 to 22. Mark, you can introduce this. You're on mute, Mark.
Keep forgetting. Yeah, just to say really that Lisa will take the members through this report, but if there's anything that myself or Catherine can add to in terms of any questions, we will certainly do so. So I'll hand over to Lisa if that's okay.
Okay, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so agenda item number 4 is the progress against the risk-based internal audit plan for 21-22. And this report provides members with a position statement on internal audit progress as at that date. In summary, this report shows that as at the 22nd of December, we had 9 pieces of work which were either complete or final reports issued, 2 draft reports that had been issued. We have 1 piece of work which is currently under manager review by myself, a further 7 audit assignments in progress. And for quarter 4, we've got 11 pieces of work that have been planned or allocated to auditors. A further 3 that have been given to SWAP. They are the South West Audit Partnership, who occasionally we've used to carry out some work in Merthyr for extra capacity. And then we have 8 audits deferred, and I'll come back to those deferred audits in a little while. Members will also note some new terminology throughout the style of this report, and this is in respect of our new regional shared service and collaborative harmonisation of working practices. So we've got new audit opinions which are categorised as either substantial assurance, reasonable assurance, limited assurance or no assurance. And in our individual report recommendations, we've also got some new terminology. So these are now high priority, medium priority or low. And the report contains some definitions for each of those categorisations, which members can look at also. Appendix A within the report shows the full audit plan that was agreed by members, and for each audit assignment within the agreed plan, it has the current status shown, where the report has reached, where the piece of work has reached report stage. We've got the audit opinion and also the number of recommendations that have been made. And members will continue to receive these position statements at regular intervals throughout the year in accordance with the work plan. And of course, where work is in progress or is currently being allocated or under review, these will feed back into a future audit committee. What we've also included in a summary format within the report is that where we've issued a report is where we've issued a report, the audit opinion that we've given in respect of internal control, governance and risk management arrangements. So members will see that for the reports that have reached a final report stage, and we do have one which we've included as a draft, we've provided reasonable assurance on 7 audits. For 2 audits, we've given a limited assurance, which was previously unsatisfactory in the old terminology. And we've also given 1 audit a no assurance audit opinion. So what I'd like to do is just go through, for the audits which we've either said a no assurance or limited assurance, is just provide members with a little bit more background information as to why we've reached those conclusions. So this report details that 1 completed audit has been given an opinion of no assurance, and by the definition, that is, no assurance can be placed on the systems of control, risk management and governance arrangements in place. Now, this one particular audit was in respect of property maintenance inspection plans and regimes. It was a planned audit from this current year's audit plan, and the audit opinion was no assurance or poor in previous terminology, and we made 13 recommendations within that report, 8 of these being of a high priority. And basically, I think we found there was just an overall lack of compliance with the authority's rules and procedures. Now, members will be pleased to note that all recommendations have been agreed, and this audit will be subject to a follow-up review in 22-23. But basically, there were lots of recommendations that came out of this piece of work. For example, there were some compliance inspections that needed to be undertaken as a matter of urgency and monitored more closely. Compliance visit surveys need to be updated to include detailed information on the inspections undertaken independently and legislation. The 2020-21 completed surveys should be inspected by the statutory complaints officer to ensure that all the actions are addressed. RAMIS, which is the IT system which is used to administer the system, requires updating, and the system should include all legislation and statutory guidance. There are spreadsheets that are maintained by the contract monitoring team which need to be updated. Contracts need to be reviewed to make sure they are being complied with the financial procedure rules and contract procedure rules. And then we've recommended some training should be provided to all business building managers and officers who are required to update the system. So I think there's a lot of issues in respect of internal controls, and a combination of all of these failings has led to us providing a no assurance opinion on this one particular piece of work. We've also included 2 audit assignments as limited assurance. That is, significant gaps or weaknesses were identified. One of these is, at this stage, just a heads up. It's a draft report on a piece of work on vehicles fuel system. So the detailed findings of this will be presented to members at a future meeting. But at this stage, it's a draft report, but that one will feed its way back through to a future meeting. And the other audit then is in respect to school private funds. Now, again, this was a planned audit for this year, and the reason why it was in the plan is to look at the central controls around the administration of school private funds. Now, I think, as we all know, school private funds operate in pretty much all schools right across the authority, and they can involve significant amounts of cash going through the system. So it's important that, there are proper procedures in place, there are systems and control, both to protect, the staff involved in the process and accountability. This one particular audit review wasn't so much looking at the processes in the individual schools, it was looking at the central procedures for the monitoring arrangements. Again, we've given a limited assurance on this area. Members will be pleased to know that all recommendations have been agreed, and we'll follow these up in accordance with our routine follow-up procedures. And again, we will also carry out a follow-up audit on this piece of work next year. But, in summary, I think what we found was that the current school private fund regulations were out of date and don't reflect current procedures and practices. There were no checks undertaken centrally on the annual returns that had been sent in by the schools. No central checks at appointments have been made to management committees. no review of income and expenditure transactions just to flag up anything that looked strange or excessive. So, you know, I think, again, a number of control issues, and, you know, this is the reason why we've given this one particular review a limited assurance audit opinion. Appendix A also shows that we've issued 76 recommendations across all the areas we've looked at to date, and each of these will be followed up in accordance with our routine procedures to ensure that the required improvements are being made in accordance with the timescales that we've been given by managers. And then finally then, in respect to the deferred audits, which I said I would return to, I think it's been necessary to re-evaluate our remaining plan for Q4 due to staffing, remote working, and the overall way in which the council is operating at the moment. Now, what we've done is looked at our audit plan, looked at our resources, looked at where we are with our current workload, and we've reprioritised the audit assignments for the remainder of the year. We've taken into account areas where we feel audit assurance is required, plus any essential pieces of work that we need to undertake. And as a consequence of this, there are 8 audit assignments that we'll need to defer until next financial year, and we'll factor these 8 audit assignments into the planning process at that time. But, you know, I just want to reassure members that this will also, you know, we'll still be able to provide sufficient coverage to allow us to provide an audit opinion at the end of the year based on the work that we have carried out.
Thank you, Lisa, very much. Members' questions? I've got a few. In the last point you made, Lisa, about the 8 deferred matters, one of them is in relation to temporary housing solutions, process and procedures, including compliance with the statutory duty. Of the 8 deferred, will that one become a priority to be dealt with as part of the of those deferred?
Chair, perhaps I can answer this one the best I can. Yeah, this was a piece of work that was identified. We did a sort of a COVID questionnaire. Catherine did this actually across the authority to identify sort of how things had worked last year from a COVID point of view, the arrangements in place to deal with remote working and the general pressures and so on. And this was something that was flagged up in relation to housing, because obviously the pressures on housing, obviously there were arrangements put in place by Welsh Government to help deal with homelessness during the COVID period and so on, but there were concerns expressed generally by the service around their ability to be able to meet sort of statutory requirements. Because of COVID pressures ongoing, particularly again now with Omicron sort of raising its head again, a number of the areas that Lisa referred to, we've deferred partly because of COVID, so including the housing solutions one, because we're still in such an abnormal situation. It didn't seem the right time to actually review what was happening at this current time. But we will be looking to look at that next financial year, obviously subject to anything that that comes out from what the service saying, or anything that changes in the meantime, because we have to take account of pressures on services. There's significant pressures on education and schools and social services, so we're very aware of that, and that's part of the reason why we're having to rejig the plan and make sure that we cover the areas of most importance and recognizing the pressures on different areas of the authority.
Okay, Mark, thanks. Any questions on the report from anyone? If not, go on to comments, and I'll come in first there. I am concerned about the report on property maintenance inspection plans and regimes receiving a no assurance, and when you look at the wording there, in the first paragraph there, it says the audit work undertaken identified weaknesses in the system of control and also a level of non-compliance to the authority's rules and policies, which puts the authority's objectives at risk. Overall opinion on the internal control environment was graded poor and resulted in 13 audit recommendations being made, 8 of which were a high priority. When you look then further down, for example, its compliance inspections need to be undertaken as a matter of urgency and monitored closely. Compliance visit surveys require updating to include detailed information of inspection undertaken independently and legislation. Any actions reported in the survey should be monitored for completeness. And it goes on then, a number of other items. I don't know what other members feel, but I feel that particular report, which you should have been able to read, because that was sent out separately from within regional audit, and I've read them, and that particularly that report there, I believe should be called in to governance and audit, and hopefully, if you all agree, we can have that as an item on the agenda for our next meeting next month, and the appropriate officers should be called in so that we can ask them the pertinent questions that I think is needed on that report. And I would move that so that we can get that into committee.
I'll second it, Clive.
I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Right, it's been seconded more than once. Do you all agree to that? Just show your hands if you do. Yeah, all the hands are going up. Thank you for that. Councillor Tovey, you had your hand up.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm glad there's some importance attached to the school private funds, because they do seem particularly vulnerable to fraud. There was a recent case in the newspaper. I think it was the school secretary stole £22,000 from a school private school fund. So it's surprised how much money goes. Well, I don't think in the local schools we've got that much, but it is important to follow these things up, really.
Indeed, and just to make the record straight, that 22,000 wasn't in a school in Merthyr Tydfil.
Oh, I know. Yes, yes.
No, but you are right. For those who are school governors, it's as has been said by there is a lot of money going through them, and of course officers were appointed to look after those change, because particularly if you've got parents usually have signed these accounts, and then following year perhaps their offspring has left the school and they've gone from helping to administer that particular account. So there are issues that need to be looked at. Thank you, Councillor Tovey. Councillor Chris Davis, and then Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like yourself, obviously, I spoke with you prior to committee today, and also had an exchange of some emails back and forth with Mark, as obviously head of the regional audit unit. And I was, like you, concerned upon reading the report in respect to property maintenance inspection regime. And I've had conversations with the Deputy Chief Executive and also with the Property Services Manager. I think there's a little bit of context, and the officers can bring their report to you next time. Quite a lot of it has been impacted by the COVID pandemic, and I think operationally perhaps the situation isn't as bad now as is presented in the audit report. But as Lisa has said, the officers have accepted the recommendations. There's been a change in the structures within the organisation that Council approved a couple of months back, and the responsibility for this has moved from the Estates Department into Property Services now. And I spoke at length on Friday with the Property Services Manager, so this is going to come back for a Cabinet Corporate Management team conversation, and I've even said to Mark, really, this should be about accountability and not just to the officers. Councillor Jones, I think, you know, when you invite and schedule this for the next meeting, and I'm glad that committee, because I was going to refer it into you otherwise if you weren't going to recommend it today. I think the appropriate cabinet member, and obviously with that now coming under Ali Nowen, property and estates have gone across to Councillor Thomas. So I would say the appropriate, you know, cabinet member, and I've asked Mark as well that when audit reports are presented to the officers, that the appropriate cabinet member moving forward is copied in as well. So we have that political accountability and scrutiny of these reports. So I really welcome today, and obviously Chris, Lisa, Alan, and whoever with Councillor Thomas can come to next audit committee, audit and governance committee, and present an account to the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That's helpful. Councillor Tubby, you've still got your hand up, but there's a legacy.
Sorry, it's a legacy one. That.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay. I think Lisa was next, and then Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to add in a little bit of extra information in respect to the school private funds. And, you know, I think that the reason why we've looked at this from a central point of view is to address those monitoring arrangements and to make sure that, you know, if there are regulations that schools are following, those regulations need to be up to date, because if we're auditing schools and they're not complying with regulations because they're outdated, well, we need to be making sure that, you know, the guidance that is issued is accurate in the first instance. And, you know, maybe not so much now because of the COVID restrictions, but at times school private funds have the potential for some significant amount of cash to be going through the accounts, especially secondary schools where there might be many trips ongoing, overseas skiing trips, you know, that there's substantial amounts of cash. So the controls need to be appropriate, and, you know, not just to protect, you know, the trail of information and the cash, but also staff are in a vulnerable position because, you know, schools are busy, staff are pressurised, and, you know, we need to have systems and controls in place to make sure that the staff are protected as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you entirely. I'm on the member of the finance committee in a high school and a primary school in Merthyr Tydfil, and you're right, the amounts of money there can be quite staggering, that needs careful control over. With what's been recommended here, which is good, will all the chairs of the governing bodies be informed, particularly as the chairs, of these recommendations and what was expected at a central level of control? If not, can I recommend that all chairs be notified of it?
I think, Chair, I'm not sure if they would be informed. The trouble is, because of private funds, in terms of who's responsible for them, strictly speaking, the chair of governors probably hasn't got a direct sort of responsibility, but nevertheless, it's useful for them to be aware and flagging up what's needed. So, as you said, Chair, I think we can certainly ask colleagues in education to make sure that this information, the expectations are circulated, not just to head teachers and to those directly involved in private funds, but also the chairs of governors as well, because they can help flag things up, can't they, and remind people of what they need to be doing. Yeah, that's certainly we can do that.
As a vice chair in one of the schools, the chairs need to be alerted that we've got these issues and that hopefully they're all being tackled and dealt with.
Yeah, certainly, Chair, we can do that. I was just going to make a quick comment on the property inspections report, really, as well, and perhaps just to echo some of the points made by Councillor Chris Davis to sort of, you know, that's all we're able to do in this short report is give sort of the main issues that arose, but obviously it's not possible to give the context in this part, and perhaps it was a bit more context in the information report that members would have had. But obviously COVID has played a part. That's obviously affected things in terms of access to buildings and so on, and buildings that were in use, and and still are in use and this sort of thing. So that's obviously been taken into account, but there were a number of areas of concern highlighted. But I think it is fair to say that the service was aware of these shortcomings as well. Perhaps not all of them, but they were certainly aware of a number of shortcomings, and they'd already started to put some plans in place. So it's not, I wouldn't like to say, look, we are telling them things that they were totally ignorant of. They were aware of a number of things, but perhaps not everything that's in the report. But nevertheless, there were still areas of significant concern, which resulted in us giving the opinion that we felt we needed to give, because at the end of the day, it could have had significant impact on staff and members of the public and so on if something significant happened to a particular building or so on. I don't need to say that, that's probably stating the obvious, but it is an important area, and it's the sort of area that perhaps people don't realise until something goes wrong, when it's a bit late then in reality. So but I think it'd be a good idea for the service to have an opportunity to say where they are and the progress that they've made in addressing the points that we flagged up, and has been said already, they certainly accepted all the recommendations and the points behind them. So I think it's positive. It can be turned into a positive, hopefully, for the service and for the authority.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mark. If there's no other comments from anyone, I'll go back to the recommendations. Under 2, it said under 2.1 that members of the committee note the content of the report and the progress made against the 21-22 internal audit annual risk-based plan. And perhaps we may need to add into there, I know we've taken a hand vote, that the report on internal audit report on property maintenance, inspection plans and regimes is called into the next audit committee. So I'll take the vote now on that. Any members wishing to abstain? Any members wishing to vote against the recommendations? All those members in favour of the recommendations under 2.
Carried, Chair.
Thank you. We'll then go, you can all lower your hands, please. Next item on the agenda is the item 5. That's the draft anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy and draft counter-fraud strategy and framework 21 to 24. Quite a comprehensive report, pages 23 to 66. Mark, I think you're dealing with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very pleased to be able to bring these 2 documents to committee. They've been a little while sort of coming your way, but just to go through the summary report, the purpose is to provide the committee with the Council's draft anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy and the draft counter-fraud strategy and framework 2021 to 24 for consideration prior to submission to Council and possibly Cabinet for approval. We've got to confirm that, but it was mainly to give the committee the opportunity to have a look, see if there's any comments or suggestions that you might want to make in relation to the 2 documents. 3.1 in terms of the covering report, the fraud framework and related policies have been in existence for a considerable period of time, and it's been recognised that they were in need of updating. In July 2020, Audit Wales produced a report entitled Raising Our Game, Tackling Fraud in Wales. The report identified 7 key themes that all public bodies needed to focus on in raising their game to tackle fraud more effectively, and made 15 recommendations across the themes. The updated anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy and the new counter-fraud strategy and framework therefore considers that report and provides a strategy which identifies roles, responsibilities, aims and objectives, fraud risks and an action plan and a fraud response plan, amongst other things, to help ensure that the authority addresses the points raised in that national report. In paragraph 4.1 on page 24, the documents are attached at Appendix A, the policies attached at Appendix A, and perhaps rather than go through the document page by page, if I just refer you to the contents page on page 28, it just gives you an illustration there of what's in the report, obviously introduction, policy statement, who the policy applies to, the importance of the environment and culture for the authority, number of definitions as well relating to different types of fraud and corruption, Section 6 there is the corporate framework. Section 7 is relating to the identifying the risk of fraud and having a fraud risk register, the process about acting upon your suspicions, who's got responsibility for what, and also the importance of prevention, detection, investigation and deterrence, and also about monitoring the policy. So it's a fairly comprehensive one. We've worked across the other authorities as well in terms of having a pretty common sort of framework where we can, as one of the benefits of having a regional service, we're able to sort of do the work once in terms of research and hopefully identify best practice and so on. So we've included everything that we think needs to be in the policy in Appendix A. Appendix B then, which is the framework and the strategy and the framework. And if I move on to the relevant page, I'll just identify that again what's contained in that strategy and framework. It's on page 46 of your papers. Again, you've got the introduction, roles and responsibilities, definitions, aims and objectives. Gives an indication of the type of fraud risks affecting Merthyr Tydfil, but it's common to all local government. Managing the risk of fraud, bribery and corruption, and an action plan to actually put these things into effect, measures of success and reporting and review. And there's an appendix to that then, which is the fraud response plan flowchart in terms of what to do if fraud is reported and suspected. Key to this, and you'll see this in the action plan, and the council's already recently agreed for funding for an investigations officer, and the appointment of an individual into this role will be key to fully implementing the policy and the strategy. So the funding's been agreed, and funny enough, Steve has emailed me end of last week to confirm that the post has been job evaluated by HR. So we know we've got confirmation of the grade of the role, etc. So we're actually meeting with Steve tomorrow to discuss the advertisement of the role. So we're hopeful to be able to fill that role to make progress in terms of practicalities. You know, as I've said in previous meetings, when these matters have been brought to members' attention, you know, we can all have policies and strategies, but you got to have the people there to actually put them into effect. So I'd be really pleased that when we're able to recruit somebody appropriate. I wasn't really going to say much more, but happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions? If anybody's perhaps thinking about a question, let me ask the one I wanted to, and it's on the point you just made, Mark, because on page 62, under the action plan number 5, it says appoint an appropriately qualified and experienced fraud investigator to support the implementation of the strategy. This post, I think, was included as a part of the capacity exercise. And if one looks at on that report, page 58 and 59, and it's on page 60 as well, of the number of areas where fraud can take place. It's pretty extensive. It can happen anywhere at any one time, and I think all councillors welcome the fact that we've got a new post there as fraud investigator, and I understand it, as you say, it's gone through the HR system there. Are there plenty of these out there were qualified for this? Because I noticed implementing date is April 22. Hopefully we are likely to get the person in post before April.
I would certainly hope so, Chair. Yeah, when I was updating this for the committee, I wasn't sure when the job evaluation would be completed, but as it turns out, it's happened pretty quickly. So so we should be able to advertise in a matter of weeks, hopefully, and then obviously there's the recruitment process, and then if they've got to give notice and so on and so forth. So hopefully it'll be before then. But these recruitment exercises usually take longer than we all would like, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that is good news. And as you say, Chair, that the potential areas where fraud can and does take place, let's be honest about it, but not for members to think that there's no work going on. We're still coordinating the National Fraud Initiative work and investigating potential fraud matches and so on anyway, but obviously what we can do with somebody in post will be a lot different than what we're able to do currently.
But this will add a new dimension to your audit work.
Yeah. So this person, and we've got to firm up the details with Steve, but this person will be employed directly by Merthyr Tydfil Council, so it'll be directly employed, but we'll work out the management arrangements then, probably have very close liaison with the Regional Internal Audit Service, and we can support that individual, because it's not an easy task to have somebody who's sort of in effect on their own, a sort of dealing with this type of work. You need to discuss things, you need to work out the best ways of approaching things, share different ways of doing it, and we'll be able to do that because of our links across the other authorities and the experience that other members of the team will have. And I'm just pleased that we'd be able to do this, because for those of us who've been involved for many years, when we used to have a team of 4 and 5 people, which was very successful, but obviously when the DWP changed responsibility for investigating particularly benefit fraud, the team effectively left lock, stock and barrel, and like many other authorities, and now we've had to try and sort of find the resources to put at least a modest resource in place to deal with fraud, and potentially it could be self-financing or even generate additional funds. So if usually I find that the more you look, the more you find, and so it could be that if it's successful, that we may be looking for additional role, possibly if it's able to be self-financing, possibly. So so good news, I think, overall.
Look no further than housing benefit and council tax reduction and council tax single person and other tax discounts. There'll be, I would have thought, plenty of work there before you're looking at other areas. The last point I just made, are there plenty of these out there who are qualified?
Good. Sorry, Chair, I forgot that question. To be honest, we're not entirely sure. It's not a big sort of pool of staff, really, because there was a big investment in training up local government staff in terms of fraud probably 15 years ago. That's when there was a big push to do that. But because, as I mentioned earlier, the rules were changed, if you like, and DWP decided to do things in a different way, it's become very much a Cinderella service in the sense that limited resources, not so much attention given to it. So whether there's going to be people off the shelf available, I'm not sure. They may well be perhaps former police officers who've retired, possibly, who may be interested in this sort of role. We'd have to see what when we advertise. I know certainly in the Villa Glamorgan, the individual came from the private sector who'd been involved in investigating insurance type fraud and this sort of thing. So it depends really who's available, and because we'll still be able to do quite a lot of investigating from home working. It will involve coming into the office and speaking to people and so on, but it may attract a wider pool because of the wider geographic areas you may be able to recruit from. But we'll have to see, and obviously conversation we'll have with Steve tomorrow in terms of the best way of advertising this and where and so on.
Okay, I'm not sure who's next. So two there, Councillor Amos and Councillor Chaplin. Was it you, Councillor Amos? I think you put your hand up first.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Chair, could I just ask, Mark, has any thought been given to having a telephone line like the DWP have, where if a member of the public suspects there's something going on, whether it involves officers, contractors, even possibly members, that they can phone in anonymously on that line? I noticed on page 41 a number of numbers are given, but they're all direct lines to certain extensions within the civic centre. Now, as I say, I know the DWP have a number that the members of the public can ring up if they suspect there's benefit fraud going on. Just wondering, has any thought been given to a private providing a line of reporting like that?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that, here we go, on page 41 that you referred to, we have got the existing council's anti-fraud line. Now, it's still in existence, but it's basically we need to advertise and promote the existence of this line, but also people being able to report things online. So there is the ability now, but I think it needs to be made more widely known then, and we need to review how that's working, and maybe even review the actual title of it. That's something we've done in another council, and we've called it the Speak Out line. So it sort of is wider than just fraud. It's anything that's people are concerned about that they want to flag up. So it may then be referred not just to internal audit or the fraud staff. It could be linked to other things, conduct issues, or to other parties. So that's something we can look to do. We can certainly, I think, if this is agreed by council or cabinet, we can look at promoting it, but we can also look at maybe making it perhaps more a wider sort of line rather than just a fraud line, but that'll need a bit more discussion. But the principle, you're absolutely right, Councillor Amos, that yes, we need to have that functionality and we need to promote it.
I was saying, I noticed on page 41 raising concerns, that paragraph, but I was thinking more of something like the DWP, which is an 0800 number, or
right, okay,
an 0830 number, or whatever they are now. I'm not sure those numbers.
Okay.
But that they can ring on that with a degree of anonymity. But obviously, if they're ringing in on those numbers, they're getting through to the council. Perhaps you'd be more likely to get members of the public to report it if they, as they do with DWP, ring an 0800 number.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's certainly, we can look into that and the mechanics around it. That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Here, Mark.
Councillor Chaplin and then Catherine Davis.
Thank you, Chair. You obviously mentioned employing this person. Obviously, if you've got any intelligence of fraud, you know where to target them. But without that, you're obviously going to have to decide certain areas for them to devote their time to investigate. And you mentioned this person needs to pay for themselves. What happens if they don't pay for themselves?
Currently, there isn't that pressure on, because Steve will correct me if I'm wrong, but the funding has been found for the role. But hopefully it could be self-financing, but it's not an actual necessity. But based on our experience elsewhere, they should be able to identify fraud. Is a long sort of payback time, though, because if you identify fraud in terms of recovering those proceeds, you don't necessarily get it all back, and it might take a number of years and so on. But in principle, it should be, but it doesn't need to be. Again, it's unless Steve corrects me on that. Well,
training and awareness of it. We don't want to see fraud. If we training and awareness and driving it out, that's a result in itself, isn't it?
Exactly, and it's part of the role, as well as just investigating, is raising awareness and prevention and so on, and making staff aware of the importance of being vigilant of certain types of things. So you have to balance out the time spent on investigating with the preventative part as well.
Correct. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, Catherine.
I just wanted to confirm as well, the anti-fraud line is transferred to my work telephone number, so my mobile number, so it is working. So if anybody was to phone through that line, but like Mark said, it does need to be widely advertised a little bit more. But we do get a couple of calls, and it's just something that then I deal with on a call-by-call basis then, so referring it to the relevant member of staff for investigation. So that telephone number does work, so just to confirm.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Any comments? This is quite a comprehensive report, together with the policies there. I'm glad to see that we are dealing with this, because I'm no doubt that as we speak, there is issues occurring that need to be picked up and dealt with. So the sooner we get this fraud investigating post, in my opinion, the better. If I can take you then to the recommendation, page 23, under 2.1, the members of the committee note the council's draft anti-fraud, bribery, corruption policy and the draft counter-fraud strategy and framework 21 to 24. And 2.2, that members of the committee comment on the draft anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy and the draft counter-fraud strategy and framework 21 to 24 prior to submission to council for approval. If I can take it to the vote for those recommendations, all those who wish to abstain, all members who wish to vote against, all members who wish to vote for it. Please do so now.
It's carried, Chair.
It's carried. Thank you very much. If you can all raise your hand, lower your hands, including myself. Right, go back to the agenda. Item 6 is the updated forward work programme 21-22, and that's the consider report of the head of regional audit, pages 67 to 72. Mark.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, you're used to seeing this report now. It comes up every meeting. It just gives an indication of what we're expecting to be on the agenda for the next meeting towards the end of February. So there might be some additional things there, but I know Audit Wales want to put a report up. It wasn't quite ready in sufficient time, I don't believe, for this meeting, but it'll certainly be ready for the next meeting in February. But there may be some additional items that'll appear. But obviously the request, you've made earlier on about the property maintenance report, that we'll make sure we liaise with the relevant service area and to bring that to the next meeting as well. I wasn't sure, Chair, was there some discussion around potentially changing the date possibly?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned. I was going to mention any other business. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend governance audit on the 28th of February. So what I intend to do is to talk to Democratic Services, obviously, and look at possibly give people an opportunity, officers and members, to look at least perhaps 2 other dates when, so when we have all that information, I'll get on to that after this afternoon, and you look out for an email coming out, hopefully in the next 24 hours or so on that issue. Okay.
Thank you.
Was that it?
Yeah, that's it. It's just just for members' information as much as anything, and if there was anything anybody wanted to flag up, but I think we've covered it.
Yeah, we have. On the proposed agenda, you've got the ability to deal with complaints and the annual report complaints. Is that something that possibly you could combine in the one report, or do they need to be definitely separate? Funny
enough, when I was looking at the papers earlier, I thought that's probably one agenda item, but yeah, I suspect it will be one. But we need to speak to Simon and Gaynor around the sort of format, if you like, because it'll be the first time that they've put it up. So I suspect it'll be one agenda item.
Okay. So apart from the information reports and the updated forward work programme, the 3 items will be to deal with complaints, Audit Wales annual audit summary, and the one that we've just agreed to put on there about property services.
Yeah,
so that should be it.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Anybody got any questions? No. Any comments? No. If I take you to the recommendations then on page 67, number 2, members approve a forward work programme for 21-22. All those wishing to abstain, please show no. All those wishing to vote against, hang on, my finger went up too early. And all those wishing to vote for, please show no.
It's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. can all put our hands down now, please. Go back to the agenda. And that's the internal audit information reports, which hopefully you've all, I think there was an issue about a password, trying to get into that, which I noticed there's been an email from Anne Taylor today, but hopefully you've had a chance to read them all. We have discussed it early in the agenda. Has anybody got any questions or comments they wish to make on those information reports? No. I think we'll be able to. I don't think it's need to take a vote on that because we have dealt with the item. So the next item is the reflection evaluation of the meeting. I think we've had an interesting meeting today. We've dealt with all the reports on the agenda, and I don't think we've come across any particular problems. Item 9, any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I have none. I haven't any. As I said, I get in touch with hopefully the change of the date for the next meeting. So can I thank you all very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed. Thank you all.